This is section 9.5, solving quadratic equations by the quadratic formula. So in a previous section, we solved quadratic equations like ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0 by factoring. However, we also discovered not everything could be factored. And so the quadratic formula is nice in that it works for every quadratic equation. So if you get really good at this, you wouldn't necessarily have to factor, even though factoring is a lot quicker and comes up again in other things. So if it doesn't factor, you definitely have to use this. If you're not sure if it factors, you can always use this as a default. So here's the formula. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So a is the coefficient on x squared, b is the coefficient on x, and c is the constant without a variable. So just be careful if one of those is missing, that means that it is 0, and that can happen. So let's look at some examples. Example 1, x squared plus 5x plus 3 equals 0. So this looks like a pretty easy problem. I'm like, I wish I could factor, but the only thing that goes into 3 is 3 and 1, and that does not make 5. So I know this can't factor, so I have to use my quadratic formula. So again, I'm going to write down the formula. So in this case, there's no number in front of the x squared, so that's 1. So a is 1, b is in front of x, which is 5, and c is the constant 3. So when you're using the quadratic formula, just like when we were factoring, make sure the equation is set equal to 0. If it's not set equal to 0, you need to get it that way first. Now I can substitute all my numbers in. So x equals negative b is 5 plus or minus the square root b squared, well that's 5 squared, and I already know that's 25, so I'm going to write that down, minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is 3, all over 2 times a, or 1. Now I'm going to simplify inside the square root. So what is 4 times 1 times 3? Well, that's 12. And 25 minus 12 is 13. So, when I look at this, 13 is not a perfect square. So if the directions didn't say you had to round, which they don't on this page, but in your book it will, this is the exact answer here. This is the exact answer. Now, a lot of times in your book, it's going to say round to the nearest 10. So we're going to have to type this in our calculator. Now, the square root of 13 does not come out nice. So we have to do two things. We have to do negative 5 plus the square root of 13, and then divide that whole answer by 2. So let's type that in our calculator. Negative 5 plus the square root of 13 is like negative 1.39. Just leave that in your calculator and divide that answer by 2. And I got negative 0.7 if I round to the nearest 10. Now there should be two answers unless you get 0 in here. So I also need to do negative 5 minus the square root of 13, which is negative 8.6 something, and then keep that in your calculator and divide it by 2. So my other answer is negative 4.3. Now these are just approximations. Again, the exact answer would be leaving it like this, because the square root of 13 does not come out. But in your book, it's going to ask you to round to nearest 10th, so make sure that you do that. Alright, let's look at another example. We have 10x squared minus 5x equals 25. So right now it's not equal to 0, so that's the first thing I need to do. is subtract the 25 over to the left side. Now, if you notice, there's a common factor of 5, so you could divide everything by 5, but that's not necessary in the quadratic formula, so I'm going to leave it. So I need to identify my a, b, and c. So a is 10, because that's in front of x squared. B is negative 5, since that's in front of the x. And c is our constant of negative 25. So again, your formula, x equals negative b plus or minus the square root, b squared minus 4ac, all over 2a. So I need to substitute my numbers in. So negative b, well, b is already negative 5, so that will make it a positive 5, plus or minus the square root of b squared. Well, negative 5 squared and positive 5 squared, remember, are the same thing, 25. Now, if you were to just type this in, and if you didn't put parentheses around the negative 5, it's going to give you negative 25, and that's going to mess that up. So I usually try and do the squaring while I'm writing it down, so I don't accidentally forget my parentheses. Minus 4 times a, which is 10, times c, which is negative 25, all over 2a, or 2 times 10. So 5 plus or minus, I'm going to simplify inside, so 25 minus 4 times 10 times negative 25. I'm going to type that all in and get the square root of 1025 all over 20. Now I'm not sure, 1025 might be a perfect square. Nope, when I type that in, I get 32 point something. So again, if it doesn't ask you to round, this would be your exact answer, but we're going to round to the nearest tenth. So the first thing that we need to do is 5 plus the square root of 1025, that equals about 37. Keep that answer in your calculator and divide it by 20. Now I got 1.9 if I round to the nearest 10. Then I also need to do 5 minus the square root of 1025. Keep that answer in your calculator. I got about negative 27 and divide it by 20. And I got negative 1.4 when I rounded to the nearest 10. Alright, last example, 3x squared plus 5x minus 12 equals 0. So perfect, it's already equal to 0. So I can go ahead and write down my a, b, and c. A is 3, b is 5, and c is negative 12. Now if you haven't tried one of these by yourself yet, now might be a good time. So I can substitute all my numbers in. So negative b, that'd be negative 5 plus or minus the square root. B squared is 25 minus 4 times a, 3 times c, negative 12, all over 2 times a, or 2 times 3. So x equals negative 5 plus or minus the square root. Let's type that in. 25 minus 4 times 3 times negative 12 is 169 divided by 6. Now 169 actually comes out, so I get negative 5 plus or minus 13, because the square root of 169 is 13. Now there's no square root sign anymore because I square rooted 169 to get 13. And now, just like before, I need to do my two answers. I need to do negative 5 plus 13, which is 8, and I need to divide that by 6. And it says round to the nearest tenth, so I'm going to do that. Otherwise, you could also write this as 1 1/3 because the 3 is repeating. And then I need to do my minus part. So negative 5 minus 13, negative 18 divided by 6 is negative 3. So we got 1 1/3 and negative 3. Since it does come out exact, you probably will want to write this as the fraction instead of the 0.3 repeating. So if it does come out exact, make sure that you leave that.